So this is again the front page of the Daily Mail of today, Monday, the 1st of March, 2021. The reason we are showing this one is because of the context of this particular theme of justice and the role of the police and the role of the judicial bureaucracy in England, in the UK. And what the Daily Mail is saying is, of course, a pack of absolute lies, because it is asserting wrongly that police personnel, policemen and women in the many police stations across the country, mainly in England, used to be offering access to the public at the front counters, access to information, access to service, advice, etc. And we have said in the previous editions that the police station that had been visible in the Brick Lane, actually Brick Lane itself, was a misnomer. It was not a police station, and it most certainly was not offering the public any access through the front counters that made any difference. Now, as I was saying earlier as well about the pre-1978 police community liaison outfit that had been set up by the then Metropolitan Police during the years 1975 to 1977, I think, in a completely wrong response to the persistent occurrences of police failing to or refusing to turn up when called by victims and targets of racism or racist attack. And there were other widespread common allegations against police discriminating against people based on the ethnicity and the race, both of which were present in the demography. Bangladeshis, mainly Silotis. And so when they set up the police community liaison operation, this is exclusive updater comment on the whole thing. And it is coming from the Kudilar campaign that was set up in December 2003 by myself and Kay Jordan to defend the community in the East End of London against the big business attack mounted with the frontage of Crossrail against the community that is known as Brick Lane. And this is in the East End of London. The Brick Lane is synonymous, has been synonymous for decades with the Bangladeshi community. So when in the immediate aftermath of the racist murder or murders of Altaf Ali and Ishaq Ali in May and July 1978, the police, Metropolitan Police, as part of their later kind of propaganda and public relations, set up a police station in Brick Lane. And it was absolutely not functioning as a police station or as being described by the Daily Mail in the front page today. And the so-called left, which descended on Brick Lane when the local community mobilized ourselves, included a little outfit called Workers' Action. Now, I think the Workers' Action outfit was represented in those days in Brick Lane by a man who I think no longer is alive. He was James Ryan, I think. James Ryan was present with me in Lewisham in August 1977 when we mobilized the whole of the anti-NF and anti-Nazi kind of people from across London to oppose the National Front in Deptford, where the confrontation took place, and James Ryan was there, was one of the people that was present, and I was there as well. So James Ryan also carried with him an outfit called Workers' Action. It's a so-called newspaper, like a tabloid, only about 4 or 8 pages. And in their coverage of the opening of the police station in Brick Lane, they called the police station in Brick Lane as the Stockade. Now, they completely exaggerated that police station's purpose and role and activities. And that shows the kind of otherwise probably well-intentioned British left's ignorance about everything. They just decided to call it the Stockade, and they did not give the actual evidence that we knew and we experienced in relation to the police, Metropolitan Police. So when the Daily Mail today says that it was the norm for police officers, it calls them, allowing the public to talk to them. And it says that 667 police stations have been shut down. Now, I'm taking quite a long kind of view about policing, about the state, about the council, about the judicial bureaucracy, because there exists no other source about these things containing the information, the evidence that I am presenting. So this is on various levels: exclusive diagnostic, reporting, update. While the Greater London Council came into being in the form of the coup that was mounted against Andrew McIntosh in May 1981 by the cabal fronted by Ken Livingstone. They set up, within a very short time after that coup, a thing called the GLC Police Committee. And the police committee of the GLC, Greater London Council, was fronted by Paul Boateng. Paul Boateng, that was 1981. And he was yet to become an MP, which he did become as part of the facade called Labour Party Black Section. The Labour Party Black Section was kind of promoted by a T-shirt that was most frequently pictured around Diane Abbott. And anyone who can look at the pictures of Diane Abbott wearing that T-shirt, Labour Party Black Section, and the various kind of versions of Diane Abbott's appearances that have followed, can see that Diane Abbott has undergone serial transformations of appearance. And Diane Abbott to this day has not behaved in solidarity, political solidarity, with ordinary black people at all. Her mentors and her kind of part-time or brief so-called boyfriend or boyfriends included the very not black Jeremy Corbyn, whose first wife has told the Daily Mail Group how Diane Abbott physically arrived at the matrimonial house that Corbyn's then wife and Corbyn shared, while Corbyn wasn't present at the time. And Diane Abbott, quite literally, according to that ex-wife of Corbyn's, commandeered the home and demanded that Corbyn's wife left London as soon as possible. Now, with that kind of evidence on the record, Diane Abbott cannot be treated with respect because she was practically, physically bullying another woman and whose husband she possessed or took possession of, according to the story that has been told by that ex-wife of Jeremy Corbyn's. And of course, Corbyn's known children are all white. So therefore, the relationship that Corbyn had with Diane Abbott must have been, in many ways, very brief and very short. But that length of time didn't make any difference. What did make the difference was that Corbyn could display as a trophy to his mates at the time that he had a black girlfriend, which is what the Daily Mail Group also published. So Diane Abbott, when she married this very black African man, probably called Thomas or Thompson, ditched him very soon and never let him go anywhere near her, probably except 1 or 2 times when she conceived this black child by this black father. Whether that one was the father or anybody else has not been investigated. She did have relationship with a black cricketer. Again, she appeared at his house and bullied either him or his girlfriend, somebody else. According to accounts given to the Black Media Workers Association by several members of the organization in the beginning of the 1980s. And then she also bullied another woman, Asian woman, in a toilet near the Great Portland Street or thereabouts during a meeting or session of the Black Media Workers Association. So Diane Abbott has bullied other women, Asian women, white women, probably African women as well. It's not something I would know unless these accounts were given publicly by more than one source. So when she was being portrayed during Corbyn's disastrous leadership of the Labour Party, that she was the most vilified and trolled against MP, it drew a lot of sympathy. But none of the people who promoted that image of Diana Abbott as the victim of trolls wanted to tell the truth about Diana Abbott's attitude about black people, her completely evident and factual distancing of herself from other black people, whatever the particular backgrounds. So, Diana Abbott hasn't spoken about Shamima Begum, has she? Not in the way that our campaign is talking about. If she was targeted by racists who must have been the dominant number of her trollers, then it would be logical to accept or assume that a person victimized by and targeted by racists like Diana Abbott should be among the first, if not the first, black woman in parliament to come out and demand to know what the PREVENT program has done and what the Tower Hamlets Council has done or not done to cause the destruction of the lives of 4 children. Shamima Begum is the most often mentioned one of the 4. But Diana Abbott hasn't done that. It's not because she doesn't know what has been going on. At least the amount of information about Shamima Begum that has been published in the mainstream newspapers and the mainstream media, Fleet Street, of course, is enough to constitute a very serious issue. But Diana Abbott hasn't taken up that as an issue. So when Kim Shangupta, working for the Independent at the time, published a report around 1996 alleging that Una King, yet to become selected as a candidate for parliament, had tried to take up or take away from Diana Abbott the seat, safe Labour seat or long-standing Labour seat of Stoke Newington and Hackney, or Hackney and Stoke Newington. I relied on that report and put the question to Una King that her attempt to snatch the seat from Diana Abbott showed total lack of solidarity. To which Una King answered by asking me, "Who are you, sir?" Now, I have been active in politics and in Tower Hamlets since long before Una King found her position as a specially sought after companion among certain white Labour politicians. And in Whitechapel, where the conversation was taking place, I was very well known. So I said to her that if she didn't know who I was, then of course she was wrong to even expect any legitimacy as a candidate for the community that I had been defending. And I was defending even as I was talking to her. So these are the wider kind of issues around the solidarity for the campaign for justice for Shamima Begum and the other 3 girls. Because these are Diana Abbott, Una King, these are not Bangladeshis, but these are black people who are affected by racism and who should be available to take part in defending the human rights of people like Shamima Begum and the other 3 girls. But so far, the searches of the internet sites have produced no evidence of any action by Diane Abbott or by Una King in support of Shamima Begum. Now, the construct that I have created, the personality that I have created today, is not new because I have been talking about and publishing and posting about Shamima Begum being let down by Tower Hamlets Council right from the beginning. So 5-6 calendar years. It is only now, because of the television channel that we are running, that I'm speaking on camera, on film. That's the only difference. But the thesis, the analysis is original but not new. Originally, Kudila campaigns, my creation of the construct, but it is being published in this way only now. And so what that takes us to is the Black Lives Matter, which I said before was a kind of worthy label, but it is not being run in accordance with the universal, objective, ethical, moral, fair, and just manner. It has become hijacked in the main as a slogan by people who are mostly doing a careerist thing, using another name, another flag, another banner. Of course, Black Lives Matter has never raised issues about the fact that there is no solidarity between people of African backgrounds coming through Caribbean or directly coming from Africa and people of Asian backgrounds or Asian continental backgrounds, because Asia is the biggest continent containing 60% of the planet's population. So Asia has got every kind of ethnicity and whatever. And the diversity that Theresa May flaunted in 2017 has never materialized even in the relationships between the people of African background and Asian backgrounds. I have been attempting to bridge the gap, but I have not been able to do that because the numbers necessary to create a sustained campaign have not materialized, because most people who I have attempted to kind of organize and mobilize at various stages, and I have not given up, have turned out to be unfit for purpose, mentally, intellectually, ethically, and morally. And most of the kind of people from the backgrounds of African origins and Caribbean kind of root have turned out to be also totally brainwashed by racists. And the brainwashing has been along the line of hating people of Asian backgrounds. As I said before, people from the Caribbean, which is a very small population of the whole world, it's smaller than the smallest state in India. But they actually are so degenerated in their minds about Asia and subcontinent that they think that the subcontinent of nearly over 1.5 billion people is inhabited mainly by coolies. Coolies is a contemptible word of contempt And there are not many coolies in the populations of any of the three main countries. And coolies was created by the British, mainly for the railway kind of lines. And the contempt to the Asian people and population is very rabid and very kind of active. The other side, the Asian people's contempt for the people of African and Caribbean backgrounds is there, but it's not as vehement as the other side. Regardless of the numbers of people affected by this malign mentality, the fact remains that that hostility is an active contributor to the loss of human rights suffered by both sides, African people and Asian people. And so therefore in the formal structures, in the formal locations, there is no evidence of solidarity based on opposition to racism, solidarity among the people of African and Asian backgrounds. So what Shamima Begum has been kind of treated as is similar to the treatment suffered by people, let's say topically, of the Windrush generation. So if the experience is similar in terms of denial of human rights, then the response should be united and combined. But that is not the case. And that is a very serious factor. For example, M.K. Gandhi, who is otherwise known as the kind of epitome of peaceful protests and campaigning, is condemned in most of Southern Africa because of his alleged racism against the people of Africa while he was there. So a lot of kind of episodes and events like that still persist. And I'm making this as this is a unique kind of commentary. You would not come across a similar observation even on any other channel. Most certainly not. Now, a disclaimer here at this point. If anyone knows that what I'm saying is not correct because there are others saying this, I'm saying that there is no one else saying this. But if there is any evidence that anyone else is saying this, then I would be more than happy to update and amend my statement. But at this point, I remain convinced that there is no other channel. Whatever decoration the channel may be broadcast in, on the platform may look with kind of glamorous faces and decorations. The contents are the main thing that matter. And I'm saying that the contents of this program and this campaign are unique, exclusive, just like the rest of the contents and commentary. This is part C of the Khudilar television channel being broadcast online, not on satellite or on terrestrial platforms, but this is an online operation. And we are broadcasting on YouTube and Facebook, various accounts. We don't follow friends and we don't invite friends. If there are a few under the category of friends, then they have remained by accident. So we are not adding any new ones. There are some accounts that are connected under the kind of banner of friends, but these are part of the wider movement of the campaign, Khudilar campaign, and other associated kind of action campaigns. They are not friends in the sense that they are external to us. They're not. They're part of the internal arrangement that we have been creating over the years. Now, the concept of justice is such an elusive and misleading kind of focus of attraction. Justice, of course, is the one of the most denied experience and one of the most needed and most aspired to concepts in human society and human interactions. Justice is denied. That is often the case. And there are so many kind of extensions to justice and the concept of justice that a whole program can be devoted every day about justice and the state of justice or the state of the absence of justice. Remember what we have done. We have created a whole independent front around Shamima Begum this week. We have been talking about this, but this week, after the Supreme Court ruling, we have created an entire independent and absolutely adequate forum. Why? Because once the Supreme Court, however corrupt the judiciary members and the administration, once it has given its ruling, this is called the highest court in the land, so-called. You cannot take that kind of procedural steps any higher or any further after that. And that means that Shamima Begum doesn't exist, which is exactly the opposite of what the truth is. And we are asserting the truth that Shamima Begum is very much around and very much entitled and very much in need of solidarity. So we have created the front. It is constitutionally, morally, ethically, democratically, transparently, absolutely valid and right. And we are creating the atmosphere for debate, for understanding, for learning about what happened to Shamima Begum and her three friends, and what has been going wrong in the council, what has been going wrong in the role and behavior of the so-called members of parliament who have been in place since 2010, let's say. Because I don't believe that Shamima Begum or her friends were in any way aware of the radical whatever until they were more than 10 years old, at least. And a word about the parents of this child and the parents of the other children. At one stage, one of the girls with Shamima Begum was kind of characterized as being the daughter of a man who had, as they said, Fleet Street said, extremist tendencies and whatever. Now let me go back to 1992 and the Stratford School. Now I organized the outfit called the London Collective of Black Governors. And I did that because nobody else was doing the organizing, and I had to do it because of educational purposes. So in other words, what I've been doing and what this campaign is about and what this campaign represents is set up a parallel kind of series of action platforms to deliver those services, those actions and activities, and those voices that should have been there but haven't been there. So the London Collective of Black Governors, although it wasn't as an organization originally organized by me, It was literally called London Black Governors Collective. And I reorganized it after 1988 election held in a secondary school in the London Borough of Camden. So when I was elected at that AGM of what used to be London Black Governors Collective, I set about reshaping and reorganizing it and making it political and alive. It wasn't political, it wasn't alive. It was a really narrow, completely corrupt and servile outfit, like the Operation Black Vote, which I shall not go into details about here, but just to say what that was. So when I became the secretary of the London Collective of Black Governors, I did that by instantly politicizing the whole thing. And that politicization, in part, was intended to bridge the gap between African and Asian. And not only that, create a forum among the school governors where the racist status quo of the assumptions was challenged and replaced by something constructive, far-reaching educationally, ethically, morally, and transcending the limitations of racist servility imposed via the textbooks and books of theory about what education was. This was completely new, unheard of in London, in the UK. So I came up against obstructions from three kind of fronts. The servile ones among the Asian people, many of them were resentful personally, jealous. Not a new phenomenon in my experience, but I had to contend with the jealousy of the petty-minded morons. So that is that one corner. The other corner was the mainly Caribbean origin, African ancestry linked people. And the other, of course, the mainstream racists in places of power and decision making in schools, as well as in the Inner London Education Authority, where I had been a community representative since 1982. So all of these are references to very heavy physical and mental and intellectual work and engagement that I was having to engage in order to combat and counter the racism that had pre-existed and also was getting worse because of my activities. So upset were all these various forces at my activities that when I began to defend this man called Ghulam Rasul Shaida, who was a parent governor at the Stratford School, one of the things they did a number of things, but I'll refer to this one about the television station or channel called London Weekend Television. And they set about formulating a scheme or a scam to frame me. I mean, they thought that I was some kind of alien descended on earth from somewhere else, because my audacity in challenging the racist status quo and the racist obstructions to Ghulam Rasul Shaida were unacceptable because they wanted an Asian man, which is what Ghulam Rasul Shaida was, to take the orders from a woman called Anne Snelling. Anne Snelling was the head teacher of that grant-maintained school at the time. And it was on a different kind of level in confrontation with the local council, which is the perennially Labour-controlled New Home Council. So Anne Snelling, whose name I think we edited, or I edited, to Anne Smelling, smelling of racism, genuine racism. Anne Snelling and a few other racists with her decided to combat and oppose Ghulam Rasul Shaida. And Ghulam Rasul Shaida, although he claimed to have had, quote, formal education, including having done a master's in Pakistan before he came to the UK, came across as being incapable of understanding the structure of various institutions in this country, including the structures of the schools. Quite apart from that, he came across as being very naive politically, and in terms of knowledge, he was very poor. And I was not part of anything to do with Stratford School. I had no connection with them. I was organizing the London Collective of Black Governors, but not based on any subscription. It was mainly a politically mobilized organization that offered services and tutoring and tuition based on the minimum numbers of people that could be reached. It was not a bureaucracy. It was radical, dynamic action program embodied by me, embodied in me. And that's what was happening. So I was not connected with the Stratford School as such, nor was I a parent, nor was I a governor or anything. But one day in the London evening, No Standard, I read a piece. I read a piece, byline to a Hindu called Shekhar Bhatia. Now, Shekhar Bhatia, I think, if I'm not mistaken in my memory, was once or was about to be married to the Punjabi actress. But she was not connected with his writing in the evening, No Standard. And he wrote a piece which was headed that this Ghulam Rasul Shaida was in fact one of the Muslims campaigning against Saitan Rushdie. Nothing could be further from the truth. This guy, who was of the mold mentally of the ignorant Muslim, he wasn't anything to do with campaigning against Saitan Rushdie. Not at all. And although I had been following the dispute between him and Anne Smelling and the New Home Council's corrupt interlocutors and interferers, I was not involved or in contact with them at all up to that point. But when I saw that in the evening No Standard, that this guy, who was not at all involved in any campaign against Saitan Rushdie, was being described as an anti-Saitan Rushdie radical Muslims, I thought that this campaign must be taken up, because I saw clearly that the racists had confected a device, which is they deployed Shekhar, the anti-Muslim Bhatia from India, to visit this Ghulam Rasul Shahida in Neom and make him say the stupidest possible and most irrelevant thing. He was asked whether he liked Sayyid Nursi or not, or whether he was opposed to Sayyid Nursi. And as the most typical, classic simpleton, Ghulam Rasul Shahida said yes, he hated what Sayyid Nursi was doing. It was completely, absolutely triggered, and it was a trap that the crook Shekhar Bhatia set for his racist masters and mistresses. And he had a big piece against Ghulam Rasul Shahida. And I don't remember the sequence of events after I read that in the evening, Nost Understanded, whether I found the paper first or whether I issued a statement by fax, because remember it was January 1992. Internet and emails were yet to come, long way. This was the days of the fax machine, if I remember correctly. And that is what happened. I issued a statement from the London Collective of Black Governors denouncing Anne Smelling, denouncing the racists and the evening Nost Understanded. And there I was, bang in the middle of a campaign that all the racists in Fleet Street were totally, absolutely horrified by. They thought I had landed from the spacecraft called Radical. And they left nothing to chance. They sent all kinds of morons to knock on my door in Stepney, in New Road, and photograph me and try to catch me making a stupid statement. Now, they didn't know that I knew that that was what they would be going to do, and I had to do it. Now, I never wanted, there was not even one single minute to spare. I had so many other legal kind of entanglements, engagements, and attacks to deal with. Attacks because of my politics and my, let's say it, my purity of my politics, because they couldn't find anything in my work that was corrupt, that was dishonest, that was careerist. So they had to find some kind of image or imagery to kind of print around me, to which I shall come later. Now, when I became the representative of Ghulam Rasul Shahida and his colleagues, what that created was an additional servile kind of offshoot that came from other Bangladeshis that included some of the parents in that school. Because they thought that I was hijacking something for purposes to enhance myself. Now, anyone who has seen my log and timeline so far would know that I always go out of my way to upset any prospect of getting anywhere career-wise. I would rather tell the truth than make any careerist progress. I never have needed a career. Even before I came here, I never needed a career, but I had lots and lots and lots of options and offers, all of which I rejected. The latest offer, despite the political kind of difficulties and differences that Ziaur Rahman had in Bangladesh. I mean, Ziaur Rahman offered me more than once to go to Bangladesh. And he offered in the context of appreciating some of the work I had published about his visit to Britain. And he was very convinced that I could do similar things and help him get a good media kind of operation going. And I could have made, in conventional terms, lots of money and all the rest of it. But I said no. Because to do that would be to come across as having done it for that purpose. And I would never do that. So where was I? So when I saw this Ghulam Rasul Shahida being trapped by the Evening Standard, Shekhar Bhatia, and I took charge in controlling the proceedings from then onwards. One of the things was that the other Bangladeshi governors became jealous and they started spreading rumors and whatever about my motives. There was no secret motive. And one of the morons that also got involved because of the high profile that I had created through the mainstream media was this thing called the musician turned Muslim, Cat Stevens. And Cat Stevens idiotically sent a very heavy accented, Scottish accented Muslim to the address of Ghulam Rasul Shahida when I was present there. And this idiot tried to derail the campaign into the direction of what would be factually an Islamist kind of takeover. So I told this moron in no uncertain terms to get lost. So you can see where I'm coming from. I have been actively discouraging the departure of ordinary engagements into lines that could be interpreted as being linked to some kind of Islamist activities. And this was nothing to do with Islamist activities at all. But I had no evidence on which to stand any complacency. So I said to this idiot, sent by the idiot Cat Stevens, to get lost. It is possible to imagine, looking back, that I was probably physically very agitated at the appearance of this agent for Cat Stevens. Now, all these years later, Cat Stevens is exposed as a half-baked Muslim himself. And I'm not going to detail his dishonesty and corruption and self-seeking enterprise as a, quote, converted Muslim. The point is that Cat Stevens was an idiot who didn't understand the depth of the racist criminality that is operated against Muslims by Fleet Street, and as it was in this case. Take a pause and think about all these factors. These are stark, absolutely direct, evidential, original facts. And so what happened with Shamima Begum actually had happened with the Stratford School, because the total population of the parents and the guardians around this school that is called Bethnal Green School at the time that these girls were filmed crossing from Turkey into Syria. There was total, absolute lack of any enlightenment, any awareness, let alone any sophisticated political, strategic thinking on the part of any of the people who are parents and guardians of that school. And what came about or came across through the various episodes of various publicity around these girls was that neither the parents, nor the teachers, nor the wider local community treat me as an alien living in Mars or somewhere, because I was not connected with the goings on at the school at that time. None of them even made a squeak, let alone make a comprehensive statement about what had happened and what should have been done and what wasn't done and so on. Because as I said in the construct that I've created earlier, that treat Shamima Begum and three of our friends as girls that have been kidnapped. Imagine what would be the reaction if even one of the girls was kidnapped. It would be shock, horror. But nothing was even squeaked about the fact that these girls had gone to such a catastrophic destination. 15-year-old girls, teenagers, going to literally a battlefield, the like of which has not been seen since the Crusades. And to this day, there is not one person in the whole community in Tower Hamlets that is even aware of what crusade is in the context. So what they are doing on the Facebook and other social media accounts are exchanging their photographs and their kind of petty solidarity and affiliations with one another. These are grown men. Most of them are bearded Muslims. And they're stupid. And the Council of Mosques in Tower Hamlets, as a collection, as a platform, has been behaving as dishonestly as the others in the so-called Muslim community. So it's very important to get all these facts on the record. Anyone watching this, there may be one or two people actually watching this. Anyone watching this is most welcome to factually, strictly speaking, factually comment on what I'm saying. If they think that any of the facts or any of the summaries or any of the surmises or any of the inferences or suggestions that I have been speaking is inaccurate in any way, then I'm again inviting them to put forward evidence, source, accessible source and accessible materials, date, time, chapter and verse, and person or personnel to correct if they think anything I have said needs, quote, correcting. And I shall update my commentary. But otherwise, generally in the narrative, I remain firmly convinced that what I'm saying is absolutely correct, factual, and morally, intellectually, and politically, and ethically, legally, and constitutionally, absolute the right thing to say. None of this will be, of course, available or found in any of the newspapers, either the Guardian, the Daily Mirror, the I newspaper, the Online Independent, and any of the others. None. And none of the so-called editors, including the so-called education correspondents or editors, has got either the knowledge or the abilities to fathom most of what I'm saying. And that is the problem, perennial problem of unfitness for purpose that Boris Johnson embodies and personifies and Keir Starmer corruptly apes and imitates. So we have the concept of justice to deal with, haven't we? So where is justice? Where is justice? It's not in the word justice. It has to be evident in the process, in the delivery, in the engagement. And there is no process, there is no delivery, there is no engagement of justice for justice in any part of the state, including the corrupt judicial bureaucracy. The Neubergers, Julia Neuberger and her relative David Neuberger, the Neubergers have had a very privileged kind of series of platforms. And these Neubergers have been aiding and abetting racists in this country. Contrary to the myth of their background in Germany. If they were genuinely kind of survivors of Nazism, then how is it that they can square their collusion with the racists against Muslims and racists against African and Asian people in this country? Which is what the ruling, although read out by the current president of the Supreme Court, the man called Reed, R-E-E-D, the ruling contains the whole pack of lies and prejudices devised by racists in the judicial bureaucracy in this country. As I said yesterday, Shamima Begum was denied even the option to apply for permission for judicial review to come to the UK to promote her arguments against the decision by Sajid Javid to remove her British citizenship. Now, I'm probably one of the very few people on the planet who reads all these papers and who has been reading so many papers published everywhere. And I can say with conviction that the behavior of the Supreme Court on Friday against Shamima Begum would never be even contemplated had this child been a white-skinned one. But the fact that she's of Bangladeshi origin is not white-skinned in the kind of white sense of the term, gave them the license to feel that they were exempt from, they are immune from accountability, and that they had the license to discriminate and break the law, which is what has happened. So this whole series of things that they have done against Shamima Begum and the other children constitute ground for a campaign to demand justice for them. And that is why we have launched the campaign for justice for Shamima Begum. And this campaign targets the local council, the Home Office, the court system, and the rest. And it's not something that is written in any book, most certainly not written in any long read in any of the Fleet Street pretentious papers. And it will actually provide a platform for justice against the unjust judicial system for all its victims.